the world is constantly changing, and the more AI gets adopted, the more edge cases and use cases are applied.
Welcome to UpTech Report. This is our Applied Tech series. UpTech Report is sponsored by Terraleap. Learn how to leverage the power of video at terraleap.io. Today, I'm joined by my guest, Wendy Gonzalez, who's based in Los Gatos, California. She's the CEO of Sama. Good to have you on, Wendy.
Thank you for having me, Alex. Glad to be here.
For sure. Now, Sama is all around being the platform is a high quality training data platform. So for those out there who have a lot of data you have to make sure is accurate for your machine learning models, it's probably a platform you're going to want to check out. Now, Wendy, on your site, you state accurate data for ambitious AI. Help me understand, what was the problem that you guys are focused on solving in a nutshell?
Yeah, so there is a proliferation of inaccurate data out there. And as you can imagine, artificial intelligence is basically as intelligent as the training data you trained it on. So it's very much the garbage in, garbage out kind of situation. And so what we were really focused on is companies who are creating world-changing AI, kind of ambitious or enterprise-grade AI, they need to have a reliable, consistent source of high accuracy training data to really power their machine learning models. And that's really what we're focused on.
Now, give me just a frame of reference of the quantity of data these days that if you're wanting to build a machine learning model and for enterprise companies, mid-market companies, and they're wanting to utilize this, what's the scope and size of data that we're working with these days?
Yeah, how much data is enough is a very, very good question. I mean, certainly, I think, if you're a data scientist, the answer is going to be, well, it depends on exactly what you're trying to do. But there's no question that at large scale application, there are literally, we're doing billions of points of annotation. Companies have literally thousands of terabytes of data. So really being able to sift through how much data do you need, what data is representative, accurate, and complete is of critical importance to these companies.
Help me understand your history and why are you guys different? Basically, what's your story?
Absolutely. So Sama has a really interesting story. So we've actually been doing machine learning and training data basically since it's been adopted at large scale. So really companies started using supervised machine learning techniques to build artificial intelligence basically back in the late 2000s, early 2010. And that's actually about when we started providing training data. We've been able to work with companies, obviously there's a lot of proprietary information out there, but ones that we can talk about, like Microsoft, where we actually helped power the Xbox Connect. So you can, we were part of, hopefully if you had some amazing dance moves on that Just Dance video game you did, we can
thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, we've been working in this space for quite some time, and what it's really allowed us to do is really understand how do you get to high accuracy, kind of high quality, but not only how do you do that at scale? And what I mean by at scale, it isn't just about volumes, but it's about the fact that the world is constantly changing, and the more AI gets adopted, the more edge cases and use cases are applied. So you might have heard of sort of the long tail of AI. It is 100% accurate and true because if you can think about it, just taking the self-driving car as an example, we've got cars here in California, but there are also cars all around the world driving on, using different lanes to drive on, different weather types, different, road signage. There's an infinite amount of kind of use cases out there to really kind of replicate human context. And so being able to have an extensible platform that really allows you to evolve as the model evolves is a really big part of how we differentiate ourselves.
I feel like the true power right now of AI is the long tail or the very specific use case in this particular area. The general AI, we're probably still far off from that, but it's this concept of how can you apply it in this one particular area, which requires specific training on that topic area. Can you give any other use cases or examples where this has made a lot of sense and developing the right accurate data for you to train on in a specific area? Any other use cases or examples come to your mind?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there are so many incredible use cases, and we actually have had it's really exciting to be in this particular space. So there are many, and you just tell me when to stop, Alex. But, for example, we do a lot in consumer and media. And so there are so many applications. We're seeing a ton around the augmented and virtual reality space. So as you can imagine, applications on your favorite devices or your favorite internet engines around sort of personalization and virtualization. So, I was on a website the other day to where, I took a picture of my feet to then understand what my size shoe would be and what shoe might look good on me. There are many applications that we're seeing like this in the in fashion and retail and e-commerce. A lot around visual search applications. So how, we may inherently know what plaid or gingham looks like as a pattern or design. How do you teach a machine to be able to search for and translate and pull back the right kinds of products? So that's a lot of what we're seeing in the consumer and media space, as well as kind of the retail and e-commerce space. Also, in terms of specific applications, there are a lot of interesting things that are happening in the food and agriculture, as well as robotics space. So we've been working with companies on things like reducing food waste, as well as plant disease. So how do you use computer vision to be able to identify when you actually have plant disease in your crops and need to actually address that? We have some fantastic, yeah, it's super cool. Fantastic use cases around conservation as well. So we've worked with the Nature Conservancy and Vulcan as an example that have one initiative that's really one that we're super proud of that we got to partner with Vulcan on. They're trying to reduce poaching in East Africa relative to elephants. And as you can imagine, you're talking about, millions of acres that these rangers need to cover, which is incredibly difficult. So Vulcan had a drone solution that would allow them to cover all these millions of acres that had computer vision cameras on them. And we helped train basically the software to detect poaching behaviors. So we were looking for cars and fires and, cars that were staying in Jeeps that were staying in one location. We also had the chance to tag elephant butts. So that's how you identify unique elephants, is by the length of their tail.
No.
So we took aerial footage and to help drive accuracy of tagging elephants. So I mean, there's so many incredible applications, but these are just a few.
That's helpful to hear some of the stories. When it comes to annotation and quality checking, is the majority of it in this space image clarification? Okay, this is what this asset is inside this image. Is that the majority and the mainstay right now as far as quality checking and annotation?
So it really exists, kind of for every data type. We've seen that what's really difficult to do is the computer vision side. So that could be images, video, and there is because you're basically having to structure and identify the context of everything in that particular image. What I mean by a specificity, to use I'll just use a retail example. If you're in a cashierless store, you not only have to track people movement, but you have to be able to detect every object that's actually sitting in that basket or that cart to be able to bill it properly, right? Which is really interesting. And as you can imagine, the world never stays still, right? Products are constantly being introduced, as an example. So that's an example of computer vision. There's also a lot happening in natural language processing, which is really text. So you can think of things like, chatbots, or text categorization and classification. And then there's also audio as well. So in terms of each of the areas, they're all growing, although I would say that computer vision is really the sort of area that's got the greatest growth.
For a company to say, okay, let's get this data, let's get it accurate and be able to train on it for our machine learning model, and then we're done. We're good. We don't need to worry about it anymore. What do you say to that type of mindset?
Yeah, you can't put AI up on the shelf and let it collect dust. It doesn't work that way for sure. Models degrade over time. So what happens is that the more data that gets introduced, because the world doesn't stay still. Like the simple example when I have these conversations with folks is like, who would have thought that we'd be in this pandemic, and that when you were using, your device to use your wallet or your Apple or your Google Pay, that it may not recognize you with your mask on, right? I mean, things change, right? There's a constant evolution, just like the example I gave for products. And if you don't continue to refresh and attune the models that you've put out into production, they will degrade. And that's, it's basically called data drift. And a lot of companies are finding now that they need to spend roughly 10 to 15% of kind of their product budgets, if you will, on really optimizing and maintaining those models. So that's also something that we've been doing quite a bit of because yeah, if you go to the store or an e-commerce site and you can't find your product, that's a pretty catastrophic brand experience or product experience.
For you guys, your business models is simply basically someone comes say, we've got this much data, please go through it, and it's based off of the data size. I mean, how do you guys work?
Yeah, definitely. So we really do a few things. Our objective ultimately is to be the training data pipeline for our clients. We want to be able to really support them in that process. And what that means is that there's everything from the labeling itself. So you've got these tons of images or video clips or audio clips as an example. So we actually have a platform that allows us to, again, drive high accuracy labeling at scale. So we drive that a lot through automation. We also work upstream as well, because as you can imagine, if you have those, thousands or millions, of data sets, you don't necessarily want to train on label every single thing because it's incredibly costly. And then it takes a long time to sort of train your models. So all of that training and ingestion of the data uses, GPUs and TPUs and server farms, right? And that's a lot of cloud computing cost. So clients are kind of pulling us upstream to say like, hey, not only can you help me transform my data, but can you actually tell me what's in it so that I know, especially as I build my models, how do I get to sort of a complete data set that allows me to get to quality? So for example, in the e-commerce example, maybe we are not doing so well in, organic snacks. So that's the area that needs an injection. We need more granola bars, in our data set because that doesn't seem to be performing at quality, as an example.
Gotcha. As far as your platform itself, anything you can share about the technology stack or how it's different from other options or solutions out there?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've taken an approach, really one of building our entire platform on really sort of high quality data as well as extensibility. So our approach has been such that we know that the world doesn't stay still. It does not, it needs to continue to evolve. So what we've done with our AI powered labeling is we've been very much more discretely focused on everything from annotation types and use cases. So kind of to bring you back to what you said earlier, Alex, it's pretty difficult it's going to be quite some time before there are really effective generalized world models, right? That are like, I see everything like a human would see it. I can detect context, occlusions, depth, all these different things. So our approach is much more focused where we are really driving to end applications and end use cases.
Like an elephant, like, hey, let's train it just to know what this elephant looks like because of its size of tail.
Because of exactly, driving in automation that way. But I think the thing that's really interesting is that there are many use cases that cross different industries. So for example, people tracking is not something that just is needed in a self-driving car where you need to see pedestrians. You may need that in a smart transit network. You may need that for safety applications. We have companies in the retail space who want to understand traffic, like, coming in and out of the store. What are peak times of shopping? An urban planning company might need that same sort of people tracking information. And so it's really about how you drive to the use case. And those use cases are kind of scalable and extensible across kind of industry application, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. Do you guys have any API connections or et cetera that allow folks to be able to easily work within other platforms, et cetera? Or is it basically be able to use your platform and then they get the insights and then they export and they use it in other solutions?
APIs are definitely everything. We want to make the processes as frictionless as possible. So yeah, I mean, our platform has APIs to both launch, both training data to do things like the transformation, classification, and indexing. We do have a data focus. We're not necessarily trying to be we're not trying to replicate the model development process. We're really trying to solve for this kind of like high volume, high accuracy, high complexity data needs.
Gotcha. Curious, Wendy, why do you like what you do? Like, what about this whole concept of AI and data management? What fascinates you about this?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I have to admit, I'm a little bit of a data geek. I've always loved data. I track data in my sleep and in my home life as well. But well beyond that, I think that really that thing that inspired me here is that actually prior to joining Sama, I was actually in the Internet of Things space. And I was there so early, we still called it machine to machine. So definitely on the early side of that, but saw it as like an incredibly disruptive technology to take all this, information and sensor data and make value out of it, right? And be able to make business decisions. I joined Sama back in 2015 because I was like, holy cow, like, AI, machine learning, right? Clearly going to be the most disruptive technology of our lifetimes. But at the end of the day, you've got all these end applications that people think about, right? Like chatbots or, your devices for, recognition, self-driving cars. At the end of the day, the real magic is really kind of a layer beneath. It's not sort of the, the quote unquote sort of sexy part when you think about something like training data. But at the end of the day, what machine learning models are doing is they're recognizing a series of patterns, right? If you don't get the data part right, you could have a completely, sort of ineffective product. And so the influence that I think that we can have on really enabling companies to achieve these amazing end applications and kind of, sort of really kind of democratize AI, if you will. I know that's a little bit of an overused statement, but it truly is the case. If you can have access to that data, that's 80% of the effort. And that's what really is going to make the distinction between a high performing, AI application and a, one that doesn't function, quite frankly.
If you had to provide a word of advice for a business leader that they're looking to build an application or a machine learning algorithm and they're looking at all their data problems, and you were to provide a word of wisdom to them, what would you share?
I would say get a training data strategy. It's often honestly I wouldn't say overlooked, but even some of the most kind of sophisticated companies in the world, and the data scientists, they're focused, on really building their models. And so there is, because training data represents such a large, level of effort. So there's been a number of different research studies out there that basically say, data prep and labeling is like 80% of the effort. It's like literally how much time it takes is roughly, it represents sort of the vast majority of the effort. So actually having a strategy up front on, what data do I need? What is like sort of my quality, rubric? How am I going to identify what good looks like? Put in a, kind of a simple, straightforward way is actually incredibly helpful towards making the process and the kind of time to market much faster, right? So not only is it a more targeted approach, but beyond that, it's going to end up being like a lot less costly and take a lot less time. So having that in mind and knowing that it's not something that's one and done, like we were kind of talking about earlier, is incorporating that into the sort of cost of kind of building and maintaining your product is really critical.
For your roadmap and platform, what can you share as far as exciting features that have just been rolled out or will be rolled out shortly that you can talk about?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of really interesting activities, certainly in 3D point cloud, so LiDAR, sort of what's called sensor fusion, or, both looking at 3D imagery as well as 2D imagery. So we have capabilities there, and we're constantly looking to, evolve and grow those. We also see a lot that's happening in the video space as well. So we delivered a video annotation platform a couple of years ago and are consistently working to make enhancements in that to really drive, automation and accuracy. So those are a couple of really interesting focus areas. I think the other component too is in something I sort of call model optimization, which is really how do you address the data drift, and how can you, sort of create more visibility to your clients to help them understand where they need to kind of refresh and retrain their models. So we've done a lot of really exciting development around the analytics space. I think that's kind of part of our secret sauce. So we've really highly instrumented every aspect of our platform that allows us to, to detect data drift, basically, which is exciting.
What's the vision for Sama? Like, where are you guys headed, and what can you speak to that?
Oh, definitely, yeah. So we really want to be the end-to-end training data pipeline for our partners, right? Something to where they can really, which I really view as an enablement play. So we're not, here to create, models, for example, that might even one day compete with our clients. We're actually there to really enable the end application, and to do so from the end-to-end basis of the data. So it's everything from supporting them and what data do you need, what is the best tactic or technique to label the actual high volumes of labeling data, the ability to really maintain and refresh that, and to be able to tune, and support the models as they, kind of go through their application development process.
Wendy, I want to ask you just a question here. People always are scared of AI when it comes to Skynet and et cetera, things where AI is going to be a bad case, or rather AI and bias, and there's just so many horror stories or concerns when it comes to AI taking jobs away. Can you share any happy news? Like, how can AI be used for good?
Absolutely. We're seeing so many exciting applications of AI, in particular to address all sorts of kind of different social ills or issues. I mentioned the Nature Conservancy before. We've done things with them, for example, of helping improve the sustainability of fisheries, and not over depleting overfished areas. So it's a combination of not only protecting the environment and really monitoring, fish growth and movement, but also advising the fishermen whose livelihoods depend on this on how they can work in sustainable areas, right? So how they can continue to basically, keep their livelihood while not overfishing and having harm into the ecosystem.
So you're actually equipping fishermen to be better at fishing. How does that actually work?
Yeah, it's amazing. So you can use computer vision to understand and detect fish movement. I didn't think that I would really be putting those words together in a sentence in my lifetime, but yes, fish movement is a thing. And there's so many different applications, Alex, that I think we're so proud to be a part of. So we're working with a couple of companies on food waste, to where we are understanding not only how are companies producing food, everything from catering and beyond. How do you make sure that the right amount of food is prepared so that you don't basically end up dumping all this excess food? How does that food then get channeled to the right places if you have too much, right? So it's really about closing the gap, and ensuring that if we are able to reduce food wastage, we're also able to have a positive effect on the environment, because less food, is the CO2, the water, and everything else that is used to manufacture food. So those are just a couple examples of really interesting social kind of for good AI, but there are so many more, everything from sustainability to equity. So there's some really interesting things, for example, that LinkedIn is doing in terms of ensuring that the candidates that you're able to serve up come from diverse backgrounds. So there's a whole bunch of really interesting stuff happening.
You were just telling me about another use case of AI when it comes to chick eggs.
Yeah, there are. So an unfortunate fact of producing eggs is that oftentimes to recognize the gender of the chick, so that if it's egg producing or not, they actually have to destroy the chick. This very cool startup has identified a way to identify gender at the egg stage, so that you can actually avoid destroying all these millions of little chicks a year for the purposes of producing more eggs. I mean, it's some pretty incredible and cool problems that people are solving with AI.
Last question for you, Wendy, just a fun one. I'm curious, tech predictions. Looking ahead here, near term, long term, what do you think we can predict to see when it comes to tech innovation?
That is great. Yeah. Wow. There's so much out there. I'll maybe start with what I predict would happen in the near term. I know it's kind of an opposite way to answer your question, but we've got a long way to go. If we were using a baseball analogy, I'd say we're probably in the first or second inning of the ball game as it relates to the deployment of AI. There is so much left to be done. I think we are many, many years away from that notion of kind of generalized or world, kind of worldviews or concepts in terms of, and I would say that across vision, language, and audio. But in the meantime, I think there is an incredible amount of game to be done across the board for companies that are really looking at how do I basically reduce the cost of how I'm deploying whatever function it is, right? So on the manufacturing side, we're seeing a lot of really interesting, applications there to reduce everything from the, or I should say to enhance things like defect detection. So a lot of energy going into manufacturing. We see a lot coming out in the healthcare space. It's incredible, but it's everything from robot assisted surgeries, which is absolutely incredible, to things like disease detection. So there is some amazing work that is going to be done and advancements that we see happening there. And while those are the areas, in addition to, of course, transportation and kind of consumer media that we're already seeing some very good traction in the course of the next couple of years, I mean, AI is going to be pervasive across like literally every industry application, from I mean, there's just sort of too much to be gained, if you will. So that was a broad answer to say that the singularity is happening anytime soon. We won't quite be worried for Skynet in the course of the next few years here. There's a lot of work to do, but it's incredibly exciting to see how pervasive this is.
I appreciate your excitement for the future of AI. I'm with you 100%, and the use cases are numerous and exciting to then have accurate data to build those right algorithms. So those out there, if you do need accurate training data, you can go to Sama. Sama is sama.com to be able to learn more, be able to request a demo. Thank you again, Wendy, for your time and be able to share your insight in this discussion. It's a good time.
Great. Thank you, Alex. I appreciate it.
All right, everyone. We'll see you on the next episode of UpTech Report. Bye-bye. Have you seen a company using AI, machine learning, or other technology to transform the way we live, work, and do business? Go to uptechreport.com and let us know.